My name is Maria, and this is Apollo, and welcome to another video.
I like it, I go la 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 la. I like it, I just wah 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 wah. Oh baby, say it and make it a daily bright.
Hey guys, welcome back to my channel. I have Apollo joining me here today. He's a bit of a troublemaker, but he's adorable. So for today's video, I thought that I would go over 5 books that I didn't particularly care for, but that might be an unpopular opinion because I rate books pretty generously. I think I give a lot of books 4 and 5 stars. But there were just a few books that just did not do it for me, or they made me angry in some other way. And today I'm just going to be going over 5 of them. So without further ado, let's get into the video. So the first book that I have to talk about today is The Cabin at the End of the World. Now, I think this was the only time where I read a book and I actually remember how angry it made me. I remember everybody was reading this book and I just had to jump on the train. And I think it was also more horror than a lot of the other books I read at that time. But I was intrigued and the premise sounded really good. And when I was reading it, I thought it was interesting enough.
I can tell you I was wrong.
But for some reason, it just did not do it for me in the end. So this book is about a cute little family with 2 dads and a little girl who are vacationing in a cabin. And one day, these people with a lot of weapons and carrying a lot of really odd things come and knock on their door and say that they are responsible for saving the world. And what they have to do is even more shocking. But I'm not going to spoil that because I think that is a very mind-blowing part. At least it was for me. Now, why do you say I disliked this book so much? I think the writing was written well enough. I was reading it pretty quickly. I was getting through it. It was very thrilling.
Too many things happening.
And, with some horror aspects, but the thrill was definitely there. And it definitely had me on the edge of my seat. But the reason why I hated this book so much is because the ending was so ambiguous. I do not want to spend hours and hours and hours reading a book only to literally get no answers whatsoever. And that is exactly what happened in this book. So if you're thinking about picking this up or it sounds interesting, keep that in mind because that was maddening. I seriously hated that. And I should have probably given it a 1 star just because of how strong my overall feelings were towards this book. But as I've said before, I'm pretty generous, so I gave it 2.
You're a very nice person. You're nice. Yes, you are. Very nice person. Bye.
So this novel was definitely a lot, and I think at that time I have not read a lot of books like that, so it was really just too much for me. But the ending just really didn't hit at all. And they have made a movie adaptation which had a really good ending, and in this case I actually recommend the movie to the book. But decide for yourself. I think that this was a case of falling for popular media because I remember everybody was reading this book and everybody was loving it, and so I just had FOMO. And I think I've been more careful about the kind of book that I pick up since then.
So I learned that lesson.
Moving on, the second book that I didn't particularly care for was The Island by Natasha Preston. Now, this was my first and only Natasha Preston book that I've read even since then. And I remember the premise sounded really interesting. It wasn't like anything I have ever read before, so I was intrigued. But this book, it just did not hit the spot. It did not satisfy me in any kind of way. So this book is about a group of influencers who are invited to this exclusive island that actually has not been open to the public yet. And they're gonna go there, document everything, take videos, you know, post on their social medias in order to spread the word about this beautiful island that is just supposed to be over the top amazing.
Looks like paradise.
And when they get on the island, they realize that something a lot worse is going on here, and a lot of chaos ensues. Now, I can't say that I felt as strongly negatively about this book as I did about the last one. But this book, I should have read and seen that it was a YA, because I do not like YA thrillers. And this definitely read like a YA, and it was not good.
Boo.
I don't know, the characters just really seemed one-dimensional. I was not engrossed in the story. I was not rooting for any of the characters. I honestly don't even remember any of the characters' names or anything else really that happened. And the climax, the ending was just really subpar. I remember thinking, first of all, that was kind of obvious, the ending, in my opinion, but that she could have definitely done something a lot more shocking and something that would have really just, you know, take my breath away, because this book definitely did not. And I don't know if, because I dislike this book so much, maybe that's why I haven't picked up any more Natasha Preston books. But I'm definitely still interested in picking up more, just because maybe it was like a one-off, and maybe I will like future books that I read from her.
To second chances?
But this one was definitely not it, and I would definitely not recommend. Yes, and I did give it 2 stars, so no, just no. Now, the next book is a bit controversial because it's a lot of people's favorite writer and favorite book. But the third book that I have on my list of disappointing reads is Dark Places by Gillian Flynn. Now, I love all of Gillian Flynn's other books. I've read them all. Gone Girl is my favorite. It has a very special place in my heart. But Dark Places just did not hit the same. I gave it 3 stars, but I think I was being generous, and I really did not care for this story.
I just want to be honest with you.
So this book is about a girl whose whole family was murdered when she was a little girl. And then she grows up and she's still really struggling. But this group of people who are obsessed with serial killers and like notorious crimes and such, they get in contact with her and they want to look into the case of her murdered family, which at first she's really reluctant to do, but she kind of needs the money. And so it takes her on a journey to finally find out who the killer was all those years ago and what actually conspired. Because her brother, her weird brother, was actually the one that went to jail for killing her whole family. But we don't know. Did he do it? Did he not? So she goes on a journey to find out if he actually did or not.
No one knows. No one cares.
Now, the premise is interesting enough, and I think Gillian Flynn has really good story ideas and plots, and this one definitely, it was intriguing, but I found it way too long. It was way too drawn out, and no real answers were given until the very end of the book. So this one did not particularly take my breath away like Sharp Objects or Gone Girl did. Also, I don't know if the characterization was bad for me because I just could not relate to the character at all, and so I kind of was not rooting for her or anyone for that matter.
Truth be told, no.
Because I think most of her characters are really well developed, but in this book, they just, for some reason, seemed very underdeveloped. And I don't know why particularly, but for me, they just really did not intrigue me or excite me, and I was not rooting for them in any kind of way. And I gave this book 3 stars because it's definitely not a bad book, but I think it was just an instance where it just was not the right book for me, which reading is objective, so that's totally fine. So coming to an end, the 4th book that I really did not care for, and this was another very popular one, is One of Us is Lying by Karen M. McManus. This book
I can't help but feel so disappointed.
was so YA, which makes sense because it is YA. But again, everybody was picking it up and I was just having FOMO, so I had to jump in and pick it up as well. So this book is a very regular whodunit. It is a closed setting, but actually the closed setting is only like chapter 1. After that, it's not a closed setting anymore. But in this book, 5 kids go into detention and 1 doesn't come out alive. So like, who was killed, who killed them, why was he killed? And this school also is notorious for gossip.
Wow, drama time.
And there is a gossip app where one student goes online and spreads secrets or things that might be true to the rest of the school and outs a person. So a lot of people could have done it. A lot of people had motive, and we're kind of just going through the book and trying to figure out who actually did it and why. So as I have stated, this book was just so simplistic. It did not really have any twists and turns. I actually saw most of the twists and turns from a mile away, which never happens to me. I am really bad at guessing twists and like the reveals in books.
I'm a failure.
But this one, it was just easy to predict, at least in my opinion. The writing was overly simplistic, which is not a bad thing, but the whole book, it just did not have the depth that most adult mysteries have, because this was a YA and it definitely read like a YA. I gave it 3 stars, so if you like YA suspense mysteries, thrillers, maybe pick this book up because a lot of people love it. It just was not for me. And we are at my number 5 book that I did not particularly care for, and this is probably the most controversial one because it's Birdy by Colleen Hoover. Now, a lot of people just rave about this book. People always say how amazing it is and what a great writer Colleen Hoover is, and I definitely agree. I think she's great. But this book, it just was not, in my opinion, anything to write home about. So if you have not heard, Verity is about a woman. She is a writer, but she's struggling to get her next job and she's struggling with money. So one day she gets an opportunity to ghostwrite the remainder of this famous author's, I think they are thriller or mystery books. But she's hired as a ghostwriter to finish them because the actual writer, whose name is Verity, she was in an accident and now she's in a coma, so she can't move, let alone finish her books.
It's horrible.
And so this woman has to move into her house with her husband and her kids, and she has to go through all of Verity's stuff to try to write the remainder of the novels that she was contracted to write. So while there, the woman finds a lot of interesting things and something that might indicate that Verity was not as great and amazing as a lot of people thought. This book was problematic for me because, believe it or not, this book has a lot of romance in it, which I guess Colleen Hoover writes mostly romance, so she would have a thick romance subplot in her book, but I did not care for it. I thought that it was totally unnecessary.
A little bit extra.
And also because of this, there was a lot of smut. And I mean, I could appreciate a little bit of smut maybe in fantasy books or romance books if I was in the mood for that. But when it comes to thrillers, I really do not care for that. And I thought it was just really unnecessary. And the smut just got so thick and there was so much of it that it just really took me out of the story, and we weren't even focused on what was real and what was not anymore. For a while, we were just focused on this relationship that I'm not going to spoil, but I just thought that it really took away from the story, at least for me. Now, I gave this book 3 stars.
Now I'm not sure.
It's definitely not a bad book by any means at all. Maybe you would enjoy it if you like a really big romance subplot in your books. I just did not. And I have not read a Colleen Hoover since then, although I might in the future. I have not yet. But this book was just not it for me. And also the ending of this book that everybody talks about, you know, team manuscript versus team letter. I also was a bit annoyed with it because it didn't really give us any concrete answers. And as I've mentioned with The Cabin at the End of the World, I really hate that. I do not want to put all this work and all these hours and this time to read a long, lengthy book just to find out that I was not given any answers. And I'm supposed to just kind of come up with my own interpretation and what I think is the answer or the ending or whatnot. It is probably like my biggest pet peeve in books, you know, mostly thrillers because that's what I read, but it was definitely not for me. I would recommend it though because I feel like majority of people that have read this book have loved it. I have not heard many that have not. I thought it was okay, but it wasn't anywhere near how people always rave and talk about it, at least in my opinion. And so that is the end of my 5 books that I didn't particularly care for, but I thought that I would share with you all because reading is so subjective.
I couldn't help but voice my opinion.
Just because I dislike a book or, you know, find it just doesn't mean that you will not like it, because you might, because everybody is different and we all have our likes and dislikes when it comes to books especially. So yeah, that is my five books that I wanted to talk about that were not my favorites. Of course, I have more, and in the future I will do more of these videos, but I thought that I would just start with 5 because that seems to be a pretty good number for me, at least I think. And please let me know which books that maybe are really popular that you didn't particularly care for and why.
I'm just curious.
Because I think that it's cool to read everybody else's opinions and compare. So yeah, that is all I have for you guys today. This video was definitely very fun to do, although Apollo is a bit annoying. Right, buddy? Yeah, he is an annoying little boy, but we love him. And so I hope you guys are having a great day wherever you are and whatever it is you're doing. So, yep. Bye, guys. Say bye, Bobs. Bye. No? You're not going to wave? Bye, guys.